Welcome everyone to day 4 of the STACS and Singapore FinTech Festival list of activities and events. So far, we've had a variety of panels covering many topics, where we had business leaders discussing the road to commercialization for digital ledger technology, DLT or blockchain in capital markets, to topics such as sustainability, which is a huge focus at the Singapore FinTech Festival. We had guest speakers sharing about impact tokens and responsible innovation. And in today's session, we actually have 4 distinguished guests in the technology and deep tech space. Firstly, we have Ned Lowe, CTO for Singlife. Thank you for coming, Ned. We have Rick Brown, Client Services Leader, Financial Services Asia, NCS Group. We have Chen Senior OEM Account Executive from Dell EMC. And we have Lillian So, FinTech Lead at Amazon Web Services. Now at STACS, we are heavily involved in deep tech, having built a commercially live blockchain platform with many technology partners for the finance industry. We do see that digital transformation has been a key part of the process for transforming an industry. And with the current COVID situation, an acceleration appears to have begun. It's very exciting, and it's my honor today that we have 4 wonderful guest speakers who will be sharing their experiences, their successes on the road that deep tech has had to enable or accelerate digital transformation as a whole. So now let's begin with a quick introduction. Would we like to start with Ned, perhaps?
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everyone who's joining. My name is Ned. I'm the CTO of Singlife. Singlife is a mobile savings and protection company looking to unlock the potential of money for everyone through innovative insurance products. Hopefully people have heard of the Singlife account. It's a flagship product which offers a zero lock-in 2% insurance savings plan. And we've just launched a new product this week, actually, or last week now, which is an ILP, a digital ILP, first one in its class. So it's a very exciting time to be with Singlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. Shall we have Rick give a quick self-introduction as well on your experiences and background?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Brown. I'm with NCS. Just a little bit about me. I've joined NCS recently. I've been in emerging technologies for the last couple of years. I was a CEO of a fintech company where I've worked with Lillian and Ned previously in my prior role, so it's great to see you both here again today. At NCS, essentially, I lead our financial services team across the region. And just a little bit about NCS. NCS is the largest professional services company in Singapore, and we're one of the largest in the Southeast Asia region. So I'm really excited to be a part of this team, and thank you for inviting me today to the panel.
Thank you, Rick. Hao-Han, would you like to go ahead as well?
Sure, yeah. Happy to be here as well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hao-Han. I lead the Singapore OEM team in Dell Technologies. So a bit about Dell OEM. We work with customers like STACS, who wants to embed their intellectual property into Dell technology products and solutions. So for example, with STACS, what we did was we created an on-prem blockchain appliance based on our Dell PowerEdge platform. Over to you, Jean.
Thank you, Hao-Han. And lastly, we have Lillian from AWS.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Lillian. I've been with Amazon Web Services for just over 5 years now, and last 3 years working specifically with fintech startups like STACS and helping them onboard to cloud, use technologies to enable their products, help them be secure and compliant on the cloud, and also grow regionally and globally with AWS. So very excited to be here today.
Cool. Thank you, Lillian. Now, let's proceed on to a list of questions that we have on deep tech and the industry. So the first question that we'd like to ask all speakers is actually, based on your experience, what type of deep technologies, be it blockchain, AI, IoT, cloud, big data, have you seen in your industry in the past couple of years? And how do you see it advancing in the near-term future? Would anyone like to pick it up first? Ned, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it's somewhat relevant to you guys is of course the blockchain space, and we've launched at Singlife. We've launched a product in the Philippines, which is a dengue coverage product in partnership with Gcash, and that's the first of many products which we're going to be launching. And under the hood of that is a blockchain-based distribution and policy administration system. Now, it's interesting to me as a technologist who's been working on this kind of thing for a long time that there's not that much, I think, that is particularly new about some of the applications of blockchain. But I think that the distributed immutable ledgers, smart contracts, all of these concepts that have come out before, everyone was doing it in their own way and had their own different sort of view of how things should be done. And what blockchain has really done is given us a common vocabulary and a common set of approaches that have become relatively well understood by many more people than a few years ago. And so what I'm really excited about is seeing those concepts move from being sort of stuff that technologists talk about and get excited about to real use cases that are actually being sort of consumed by the market. And what I particularly want to see, and maybe we'll touch on this later on in this conversation, is for us to stop talking about the tech and talk more about the use cases, because the tech is super exciting to people like me, but not necessarily to someone who is in a purchasing position who's like, oh, I don't really care about blockchain. What's it going to do to my business? But yeah, I think we're still very early in the distributed ledger space.
Cool. Does anyone else have to add on blockchain specifically for where you see it going and what you've seen in the past?
Yeah, maybe I can add on to that because I think, Ned, I'm not sure if you remember this conversation we had like literally years ago when you were at Amazon about the Gartner, the hype cycle graph that basically Gartner came up with to kind of map what happens when innovation enters the market. And you sort of have this trigger where, you know, innovation happens and then it shoots up in terms of the expectations that people have. And it's kind of inflated because everyone's very excited about it. And then they're like, oh, okay, like now what are we going to do? We haven't really figured out what to do with this yet. And it kind of drops into this, what they call trough of disillusionment. And then it goes back up when people start realizing like, what are the use cases? What are the business applications? And then it goes into what Gartner calls the plateau productivity, where you're actually using it in the market, in production. And so I think what I've kind of seen after 5 years of Amazon is sort of blockchain going and like really hitting the market, everybody being super excited, and then being like, okay, we're really keen to use this, but we're not really sure what is actual use case. And I think what we've actually developed now is where I'm seeing startups actually use blockchain for very specific projects. We're seeing, you know, SGX and Project Ubin, for example. So I think we're really starting to adopt blockchain into the market. And this is still very early stages, though. Even the way that like Amazon is releasing blockchain products, like we have a managed blockchain for Hyperledger, and we're releasing that for Ethereum. Or sorry, maybe that's the other way around. One of the platforms we have it, and we're kind of building out more features. And this is based on customer demand, as is all of our kind of new services and product feature launches. So the kind of features that we release around blockchain is very much dictated by market demands. And you'll see us release more and more features and services around blockchain as we move further along that slope of enlightenment and into the plateau of productivity.
Maybe just add on, maybe just add on to Lydian. I think from Dell perspective and Dell OEM perspective, actually we are seeing a lot of adoption in terms of deep tech, right? Not just for blockchain alone, but you know, if you think about it, you know, everyone's every CTO and every CEO should have ABC in their agenda, right? So what is ABC? AI, blockchain is one, cloud and data, right? So this is very important for CEO and CTOs. But what we are seeing in Dell OEM is that you know, a lot of this actually driven from data, right? So we have a lot of data that we are collecting from IoT and all that. And data alone is just part of the story, right? So I think a lot of adoption of deep tech, not just for blockchain, you know, we gain insights, right? So a lot of this in the past 3 years, we are seeing a lot of such growth in such technology. This is something that is very exciting, especially during this time and all that. Yeah. So coupled with this, I think 5G is also important, right? Factor that is driving a lot of this adoption as well. Right? So blockchain, yes, I'm seeing a lot of blockchain adoption, not just for fintech, but also for cybersecurity, for healthcare, for example. Right? How do you track drugs? How do you have ledger, keeping track of ledger of where movement of drugs are being carried out in the whole chain, right? So we are in the times where COVID drugs being gonna ship around. So that's something that we are seeing as well. Besides fintech as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that the three of you have covered really, really well. A couple of philosophies I've got. First of all, I see cloud as the platform for innovation. So when AWS starts releasing stuff like blockchain AI on a cloud platform, it's actually come to real time. I also think it's quite exciting because I was part of Project Ubin when I was with Accenture. Now to see real asset classes with products like STACS trading, I think that's extremely exciting for a technology that was going from something to solve a problem to actually having transaction rates. What you guys are doing is actually quite impressive, and we're looking to work with you, across the ASEAN region. So I think all of these are also being accelerated. In financial services, we were a bit of a laggard to some other industries, and we had a 3 to 5 year strategy of where things are going. Now that's been converted to an imperative in terms of survival, right, with what's happening in the world today. So we're seeing acceleration, adoption to cloud. I see people going to cloud harder and faster. I see them adopting emerging technologies more quickly, and actually looking at them being a larger differentiation versus experimentation, as Lillian pointed out before. So I think it's an exciting time for us in financial services.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think this is a huge shift towards a digital transformation within the industry, both internally and externally. So I think regards to this, are there any particular trends or changes to the workplace or even processes that, four of you might see in your respective areas of expertise? Are there any particular trends that you see might become the new normal in the next 2 to 3 years? And where do you see digital transformation really heading towards? Is it something that's only here because of COVID, or is it something that's going to accelerate, or is it a big hype? What are your thoughts on digital transformation in general?
Well, if I could start with that by saying I hate the word digital transformation. I hate it.
I hate the new normal.
I mean, yeah. And that hatred has built over the last few years, I guess. And I'll tell you why I hate it, is that it's such an aggressive word. I'm going to transform you, right? If you're an operations person or a finance person, which is typically where these digital transformations are aimed, right? They're not necessarily at the sales side. It's such an aggressive sort of, you're doing it wrong and I'm going to transform you. And so then you get this reaction where people are like, well, actually, I've spent the last 20 years learning how to do my job, and all of these new tools you're trying to stick down my throat, I'm not really on board, and do I have a job? And if you don't have your business on board with you, then forget about it, right? Your transformation is going to fail. And so I think we need to pick up a new vocabulary around, I don't know whether it's renovation or whether it's iteration, or whether whatever the vocabulary we choose within technology, and I've been trying to find a word for a while, is we need to change the conversation. And it has to be around, okay, Mr. operations person, Mrs. finance person, how can we make your life better through technology, and not we're going to come in and transform you, right? So that's a just as a blanket statement around transformation. Now, in this new normal, I'd say that one thing that I've seen, and I very much want to continue, is that there used to be such an asymmetry between the people who were in an office and the people who are not in the office. And I'm talking here about outsourcing partners and things like that, right? And you used to have people sitting around in a room, pointing at whiteboards, passing paper around to each other, and the people who were not in the room are basically switched off because they're like, I have no idea what's going on in that room right now. because the balance has changed and it's been democratized a little bit, where the senior people are no longer in the room either, suddenly we've moved towards better collaboration, like online whiteboarding tools. We started using Slack much better. We started collaborating with the assumption that you are not in the same room. And suddenly the productivity of all the partners and the outsourced people goes up because they're no longer at an information asymmetry disadvantage. And I really want to continue that as we go forwards in any sort of place where we do have people who are not necessarily in the room, to make sure that we're all on a level playing field.
Yeah, I would compliment what Ned said, actually. I mean, what we do see a lot of changes in the behavior as well. I don't like the new normal because everything changes all the time. And I like Ed's philosophy of we actually have business problems and client problems to solve, and we apply technology to accelerate and bring benefit to our business and our clients, right? Starting with the client, working backwards, to use an AWS term, and how we apply technology to actually make that happen is really relevant. So it's not about transforming, it's about what do we do to actually improve how we're working. And we see a lot of actually interesting trends as well as we're working from home. All things, even like simple things like call center. We're working with a digital bank. You can probably guess which one, since we're part of the Singtel group now. But people now, from a call center perspective, have to work at home. Well, how do you know before, when we're all in a room together, you can see what's happening, look across the floor, worry about data privacy issues because you've got a controlled desktop. Now I'm sitting at home. I can have a camera, take pictures. So we're actually at NCS looking for ways to apply technology to allow us to work more effectively and more securely in a financial services context, by applying artificial intelligence and other capabilities to actually make sure that, our clients are secure, the business is secure, delivering the same content that they actually had to do collectively before. And actually, how do they be more productive in their personal and professional lives, working in a different model from where they are today, where they were yesterday?
Cool. I mean, I think Ned brought up a good point on transformation as a pretty aggressive word. We're looking forward to the new vocabulary that he would find soon, probably. Maybe improvements. Yeah, and I think Rick, you definitely brought some good points as well. Lillian and Hawan, do you have anything to chip in here on trends in this space?
I feel like I have to make a case for digital transformation because it's such a core pillar of what we how we message cloud and how truly it is supposed to kind of change a very foundational and deep-seated way about how companies historically run experiments and go to market and develop products. And for me, I think transformation certainly comes with risks, and no one says that it's easy. But the thing is, when you do this sort of experimentation on the cloud, you're supposed to be able to lower your barrier of entry to experimentation, de-risk it. And I think that, with people being displaced through transformation, I always see it as an opportunity to reskill or upskill. And I kind of understand where Ned is coming from, though. I think because the messaging can come off as, I think, to be a little bit hard on ourselves, a little bit arrogant, and saying we've got the best and the newest, but I think it comes from a good place where we're truly trying to enable customers to be able to iterate faster, develop products faster, fail faster, as we say at Amazon, so that you can get a better market and kind of iterate on the spot from, as Rick mentioned, customer feedback. We're always trying to work backwards from the customer. So for me, I think if I look at how AI/ML is adopted now, for example, it's so easy for customers to kind of test algorithms and use analytics pipeline or data pipeline to kind of take direct customer feedbacks, whatever platform the customer is interacting with, and then feed it back into those AI algorithms to improve your algorithm. And it's very easy to kind of spin up these algorithms to test on AWS using a service like SageMaker, for example. And so I think that sort of accelerated experimentation, accelerated failure, actually goes a long way to enable enterprises to test out products in the market and then iterate quickly when they're not working. But I do agree that it takes a lot of kind of almost like a DNA change, a cultural change, for the enterprises to be able to kind of adopt these sort of very agile solutions. I think it's a very large departure from maybe what enterprises and other types of companies have been doing previously, but it's because they get results that are so much marginally different as well.
Well, I mean, I agree with Lilian.
Pick a side, Hao-Han. You have to pick a side.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you
that's really aggressive, yeah, I guess. we need a new word for sure.
Yeah, we need a new word. Yeah, but if you think about it, it's all about change, right? Without change, there's no human progress. And in this COVID situation, it's actually forcing us to think about digital transformation, right? How do we transform how we work? The workplace that we traditionally have been so used to, right? I love meeting clients face to face, but all of a sudden, there is a requirement for change, right? So how do we adapt to it? So in some ways, the word digital transformation can be aggressive, but that's human nature, right? Human nature is adverse to change. But in order for us to move forward, in this new norm, there is a requirement for us to do digital transformation, right? So a lot of what we are seeing in the market at this moment is, blockchain is one example. AI is also one example where we are seeing a lot of our customers, asking us, for help to, help them to move towards this new digital era where AI, ML, is something that they want, something that they want to derive insights from, right? So deep learning and all that. So this is where, where I come from, Dell OEM. We work very closely with partners and customers to drive some of this digital transformation.
Great. I think that's good. This is definitely a really heated discussion. So perhaps we can continue down this road on digital transformation or improvement, or however you want to call it, or change. I would say a neutral would be change. So, what are some of the critical success factors for this entire process? In all of your opinions, how would you classify a change that is successful in your opinion and in your experience? What are some of the key things that you look out for that would enable an organization to say that, yes, my digital journey is, let's say 30% complete and I've got my key objectives done. So what are some of these critical success factors in your opinion?
Maybe I'll take a stab at going first. First of all, I think the new normal actually is, as how Hans said, it basically is change. So there's never a new normal. It's always evolving, right? So we always have to be ready. And I think the other thing is, critical success factor is just none of us know what the future holds. So being ready to evolve, to be there for our clients, to adapt the way we work. I've talked to a couple of CEOs and that we've all in financial services, and they've all said, I don't know where banking is going to be or insurance in 5 years, but I know it's not in this technology stack. I know I need basically a platform. I need capabilities that allow me to move quicker, more faster. So if digital transformation is a term that says basically, how do I have the capabilities to move quicker and more agilely to adapt to things that come up to be the change or the normal? That's for organizations. So that's a critical success factor. I think in financial services, it's the people that have been doing a really great job, as Ned said, for the last 20 years. And now they're being asked to sort of think about their job differently. So I think a big success factor in financial services for larger firms is actually getting everybody on board for the journey and understanding that, it is a critical success factor that we all actually have a vision of where we're going to go, whether that be digitization or as a business, and how do we adapt ourselves and reinvent ourselves from a business right down to the individual, so the whole organization move quickly. Because we see, if you're running in 2 speeds, the organization runs at the speed of the slowest part to change. So, if you're transforming at the core, you need to get the whole team to move. If you're transforming at the edge and trying to bring it back, you can't bring it back to transform the core unless the core is also running with you. So it's getting everybody moving and commitment from the top at all aspects of the organization to adopt that change is a critical success factor.
Great. Would anyone like to go next? Perhaps Hao-Han, you would like to start?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I mean, if you look at transformation, right? Any change that we have to go through, it's always a continuous journey, right? I think that's where it's important to understand, right? Where when we talk about transformation, we don't do a big bang, right? It's a continuous journey, and a lot of this actually is gained by uh, um, having new business insights and having these insights become a feedback into that transformation, right? For example, if you look at a mobile app, for example, right? You launch a mobile app, you gain more information about your customers, right? You use those insights, you improve your mobile apps, you improve your processes. So, in many ways, that is a key critical success factor. Take that journey as a continuous journey, not a big bang. Use these insights and apply these insights into your next stage of your journey. Right? So that's something that I feel strongly in, because that's where a lot of this digital transformation can happen, right, successfully.
Great. I think I like your point about how it's a continuous journey, and definitely there are tweaks and changes along the way. So before I move on to Lillian and Ned for your experience, I actually like to pose a question back to Rick on something that he mentioned about this entire process, and that's getting everyone on board. Could you actually go into detail on how, is that something that's really critical, and how is that done? Especially in your experience, how would that be done with a large organization? And perhaps that might be relevant for Ned as well, in terms of getting everyone on board the same vision of moving towards a new digital future, and ensuring that everyone's comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah, I mean that's the killer question, right? And if I had the answer, I'd probably be on the main speaker stage. Not no, I'm very flattered to be here. Joking, but listen, it's a very hard nut to crack, right? I mean, I've talked to many different people in STACS and AWS and companies like Dell in terms of how do we actually accelerate this change? When you look at somebody like Singlife, they have the advantage of actually building it from scratch and building it, thinking digital and cloud native first, so they've got that sort of mindset, and then reinventing themselves. Larger organizations, to turn the ship, because it's a bigger ship, it takes more time. So foundationally, you need to figure out, by organization, by team, what are the barriers to change that we need to get? I mean, for example, risk and compliance people in financial services or operations people, they know today that, moving to cloud infrastructure, I operate and I know the moat around my castle and I know how it works. Now I go to this thing called cloud. What's different about my operating model? So bringing them through the mindset change and sort of saying, actually, it's a heck of a lot easier and better. Your life becomes a lot more transformative. And it's not about, people worry about, in technology in general, some of the misconceptions about, replacing jobs. Actually, technology is a huge enabler to allow you to do your job more effectively, and transforming it from being operational to everyone's contributing to the bottom line and contributing to client success. So, I think it's looking each area of your organization, getting that mindset and helping them think about the new operating model, because a lot of us run ahead quick, but we need to pull everyone else along from a legacy organization perspective. And I think that there are a lot of tools that NCS has built. Actually, I've done this at Accenture, but I'm actually looking at the way we're thinking about this at NCS in terms of actually how to bring organizations along in a practical way, especially in the COVID environment. How do you accelerate that change? So there are some accelerators you can use, and I'm happy to talk more about what we're doing in that space with a few of our key clients. But it's a big question. It takes a lot of time, and if I talk more, then we won't get to some more important, smart people here. So.
Thanks for sharing, Rick. Nick or Lillian, would you like to go on with this train of thought?
Yeah, I think just to, go back to Rick's initial point around kind of the criticalness of speed, the criticality of speed. And I guess this is kind of after everyone is on board, you have buy-in from the leadership team. I think when you're doing solutioning and then implementation, one of the super critical factors that I see from our point of view where, customers are kind of have an idea of what they want to build, you validate it with like a solutions architect, and you're making design choices. The customers that are the most sort of protective of their engineers' time, I think, are the ones that are able to make that like fast building and attribute to that speed that Rick was alluding to earlier. And what that means for us and for people using AWS is, I think, not building everything from scratch in terms of like all of the underlying infrastructure, right? It's like the difference between using a database managed on EC2 to like using Amazon relational database. Is the difference between running, you know, your own warehouse versus using Redshift. Like all of those little things where you're asking your engineers to manage it from scratch, do the backups, do the patching from scratch, do it themselves, and it puts so much more operational overhead for them. And like your end customers and what value you're adding to them should really be what you're focusing on. And a lot of times your end customers probably don't care about how you're managing a database or how you're managing your data warehouse. They care more about the value that you're delivering. And so by ensuring that your developers are adding more value and getting as close to the application as possible, and basically all that other stuff underneath it, whether you're outsourcing it to like an AWS or to another service provider that's managing it for you, the more you can offload to these tech partners that you're working with, the better your in-house team can focus on what your core business is and delivering that core value to your customers. So and operate faster. So I think it gets you not only kind of time to market and gets your product in the market faster, but also helps you to maintain your kind of core focus to what you're supposed to be delivering to your customers and maintains that focus on your customers' needs.
Great. I think that's definitely a good point, Lynn, in terms of focusing on the core product and core business and basically offloading the rest, so you're not building everything from scratch. Perhaps Ned, you could come in here. And I mean, Singlife is something that's, as Rick mentioned, you had something that you could build from scratch. Was that part of the consideration when you started to work on this?
Well, yeah,
project?
Singlife is a bit of a special case. Well, not companies like Singlife are a bit of a special case, but I also worked in traditional financial services in investment banking for 12 years and did a lot of work there. I think that it's complicated. I think that if it goes back to the cooking a hamburger. Typically, if you speak to the developers, the people actually doing the work, typically they're on board. Typically, they might have opinions. They might get a little religious around whether you should be using Vi or Emacs, Google or AWS. There might be specific differences, but in general, they're on board. And if you go to the senior management, and certainly the people who are responsible for top line numbers and bottom line numbers, they're probably on board. Probably not always, because they might just think it's a bit too hard, but they're probably on board. So you've got your frozen hamburger, you've got the bottom bit, which is nice and hot. You've got your top bit, which is nice and hot, and you're flipping it around, and then you take a bite and it is frozen in the middle. Unfortunately, not a delicious hamburger. And that is the problem in the enterprise, is how do you warm up the middle? And it can only be, in my opinion, I think the bottom-up approach of having the engineers try and influence their bosses is fine and all, but I don't think it will get anywhere. I think that the sponsors have to be aggressively pushing down, and maybe that goes back to digital transformation, but aggressively pushing down KPIs onto their team around moving forwards and adopting something. And in particular, more than anything else, is the risk department, the risk and compliance department. If they shout at their digital transformation team all day long, if they shout at their, director customer business lead all day long, but the risk and compliance guys are left in some dusty office somewhere and they don't get involved, it is zero chance of happening, zero chance. The risk and compliance guys have to be told that the risk appetite of the firm has changed, full stop. And if they continue with the same risk appetite that they've always had, just don't even bother, right? And as a tech leader myself, if I was to be talking or working with a company where the risk and compliance team didn't want to embrace new technology and felt that the way things were being done was the correct way being done, then I'd probably move on. There's not much point trying to convince an organization to move forwards if risk and compliance or the sort of the white blood cells, if you will, who come out and expel the attacker, have complete free reign. It's just too hard.
I think that's right on the money, Ned. It's attack from the top, attack from the middle, attack from the bottom. The middle is always the hardest. I think one of the ways to get around that as well is really have the business focus. Yeah, it's the top, but it's also the middle business people who can actually see what technology can do to actually change the business. I mean, it's great to get excited. It's great to get a developer excited. It's great to get the top of the organization excited. But if you can get the business guys excited, because we all tend to focus on technology because we're techie guys here. But if you get business excited about what digital and technology can do to transform the business, you start attacking the middle from the side a bit as well. Because did you know you can build this on STACS or AWS, and you can do it really quick by doing these things? It gets them excited about outcomes. And then the appetite for that, risk and compliance team comes. And what I'm also seeing in that space, Ned, you're absolutely correct, is you got to get those guys invested in the outcomes, right? So
right.
Embedded with the team. So, okay, guys, yeah, it's a problem, but so how do we fix it, right? Don't be just, you got to be part of the solution. If you're just telling me it's a problem, I don't need you, right? So how do you be part of the solution?
Exactly.
Yep, exactly. I definitely agree. We do work with a lot of compliance departments and middle offices, and it's the same problem that we see as well from STACS, that there's a lot of convincing, a lot of cajoling needed. And sometimes, coming from a top-down approach, that doesn't really come off too well because then they feel kind of forced to participate. And I think it's all about having a stake in it and being invested in the outcome. So that's just my take on that.
Sorry, can I add something on the compliance piece?
Sure.
Just because it's literally like my favorite topic to talk about with fintechs. Genuinely, it's security and compliance. I think because like AWS just makes it so easy to take these compliance risk stakeholders along the journey with the business, because of all of the like resources that we provide, what we call compliance artifacts, how seriously we take AWS security, what we call security of the cloud. So making sure that our data centers comply with like SOC, ISO, and all of those international standard compliance certifications to make sure that it's super easy for compliance people to do their due diligence, right? We provide all the reports. They're able to use those reports to their submission to regulators, to their end clients. We have frameworks like well-architected review, which is basically an AWS framework for doing your due diligence on your AWS environment against AWS best practices. So all of those tools we make super readily available for compliance folks to work really closely with the tech team to vet through what they're running on AWS and basically de-risk it. And I think it's like, a lot of the times actually, like that's the first conversation that I have with fintech customers is how does AWS look at security and compliance? And it's kind of the first conversation that just sort of makes everything else so much easier for them because they're like, oh, okay, AWS has it figured out. I just need to figure out like with security specialists, like how to secure myself in AWS. But other than that, I can kind of rely on AWS for all of these sort of outsourced risks and things like that. So yeah, it's one of my favorite topics to talk with customers about. I think we have a really strong story at AWS about compliance, which is really weird to geek out about compliance because other people hate it usually.
It's a fair assessment, I guess, of your personal interest in compliance. Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
It's about bringing industry and technology together to get it done, right? So, what we try to do from an AWS perspective, you're spot on. What we try to do, even with the digital bank I was talking to today, is how do we bring our industry experience and apply technology to make sure that we stay within the Singapore TRM requirements, for example, and we filled out our VPC architecture for the bank or an insurance company. How do we think about all these elements together in our design? Because every region, every country has a story. So it's merging the industry experience with technology to get great outcomes.
Just when you were talking there, one point that I like to sort of postulate, I don't think there's an answer to it necessarily, but if you look at the way that companies have typically approached TRM and RMIT and whatever else it might be, it's been, here's my policies, here's my actual work, now prove that my actual work through after the fact evaluations and evidence and audits and whatever actually match the policies. And increasingly, we've been saying, well, how do we sort of prove it out from using tools and AWS, etc. I want to actually go one step further and flip the whole thing on its head. And I want to say that my policy is my AWS environment. Not that I've proven that my AWS environment matches my policy, but flip the entire question round and say, as long as I can do an automated report through whatever tooling is out there that shows that the policies that I have set up in AWS are compliant to the TRM, then that is my policy, full stop. And so then there's no evidencing or any audit or spot checks or any of that kind of thing, because I've auto-generated my policy based on my environment. If I can get that right, and this is my new big thing, if I can get that right, then audit becomes such an exciting process. It's like the DevOps of audit. It's audit ops. I don't know what you want to call it. Is how do you
continuous compliance?
Yeah, well, it's continuous compliance, but even continuous compliance is compliance against a policy. And I'm talking taking continuous compliance plus, which is that the policy becomes code. And in the same way that we've had infrastructure as code, we've had, and I know we talk about compliance as code, but I have yet to see anyone who's literally submitted a set of AWS config rules to an auditor and say, this is my policy. So there's one missing step still, but I think we're going to get there, where we literally take the rules of IAM, of config rules, of your VPC setup, of your flow logs, and auto-generate a policy that is human readable by a regulator who goes, okay, the fact that you've done all of that, and as well as being human readable, matched back to the TRM point by point, as so many tools out there now do, and yeah, that would just make the whole process so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point that Ned has brought up. Basically codifying policies within a framework, and then basically having that be your platform for the actual compliance itself. So I think this is something that's probably a little bit beyond tech, because in tech-wise it can be done. Unfortunately, it's more on the compliance side, recognizing that platform and that set of rules and set of code as the actual policy itself. So, has anyone here have any thoughts or opinions on tackling that piece of the puzzle, since this is pretty much a full set of problems that, it's a multifaceted issue that's not just tech related?
Anyone who's worked in a regulated industry as the regulated entity, not as a, I don't mean to say anything against other people on this call, but someone who's been the subject of the audit, who has been the person talking to the auditor or the regulator and having to show the documents and have to show the, look here, this is how we've hit TRM 5.2, it's incredibly complex, because as soon as you start saying, but I've got a tool for this, then the immediate question is prove that the tool actually does what it says in the policy. And the golden record comes back to what your policies are. And of course, at Singlife, we have good policies and everyone's aware of them, but there are financial institutions out there who have created a bunch of policies that then sit on a shared drive that literally no one has ever read. Or even worse, they haven't even written the policies. They've gone to a compliance consultant who's given them the policies, particularly if you're a startup, and literally no one's ever read them. They're just generic policies that have got nothing to do with what is actually being done until it comes to the audit. And then you're quickly scrabbling through, reading through these documents that you inherited, trying to find how it fits back to what you said you're going to do. And there's a big jump. Yeah, there's a long way to go before auditors or regulators or anyone is going to move away from those written policies, which is why I was saying, if we're going to have any sort of framework or tooling around this, it has to generate documents that are readable by in the same fashion that they are right now.
That's a very interesting thought. I think definitely, I think it's going to go beyond this panel, and definitely continue that conversation.
Yeah, it's a different conversation. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We do have some audience questions. I think right now we could tackle one of them. This is pretty big and pretty generic. So this question basically asks, can you discuss some of the challenges faced in translating deep tech from innovation labs to the marketplace? and how should companies best position themselves to capture the benefits or opportunities brought about by new deep tech capabilities without cannibalizing their current legacy systems. Yes, yeah. Does anyone want to take that first? So,
Well, I can take that, Jean. So where I come from, Dell OEM, this is where we have been set up to work with startups, with partners, with customers who have their own intellectual property, right? Deep tech, as in AI, ML solutions, and all that, right? So when you talk about going to market and you want to build appliances for the marketplace, we do have a global setup where we have global engineering. We have we talk about compliance. From compliance point of view, from a hardware point of view, we talk about specifications, right? NEPS compliance. We talk about mil specs if you are talking about rugged edge appliances, and this is where we want to help deep tech innovation startups to build such solution for the marketplace. Why this is important is because you focus on what you do, right? You focus on what you do best. Let us worry about how we build this appliance in the factory for you, and that's how we have helped hashtag to do a lot of this, where we spend a couple of weeks, Jean, to test a market-ready solution for a on-prem appliance for the financial industry, right? So this is important is because you focus on what you do best, your deep tech solution. We focus on what we do best, which is where we build the solution for you. We work together to market the solution for you as well.
great. Thanks, Hao-Han. Does anybody else would like to take up this question as well?
I mean, that's the world hunger and global warming question, right? So there's a lot in that question to solve. I think that there's two elements to that question. It was around innovation labs, experimentation. I think that is a very useful asset. I think, as Lillian said earlier, to have in part of your organization, because it gets you in the culture of actually doing things and experimenting and bringing it back and then applying real business problems. But it's also great to partner with people like STACS who've got real world innovation experience in that space to actually apply what we're doing, and in companies like NCS, STACS, AWS, and Dell can help accelerate that journey for any client, I think. Around the legacy question, I think that's a very interesting one to me. So emerging technologies, deep technologies, and legacy are not mutually exclusive, right? They can coexist. And in fact, you can't wave a magic wand as much as we'd like to and actually remove some of those impediments. Even Singapore Life has a few legacy baggage things that they've got to get done, right? So, but trying to figure out how to make those things coexist, and by doing creative things like uncoupling three-tiered architectures to an operational data lake to 65% of a banking transaction comes actually from a read perspective. I don't need to go to a legacy system to figure that out. And we can use technologies on AWS to actually do those kinds of things. And in terms of also transacting, using platforms like STACS to, instead of going through my normal trading system, which takes a long time to do, I've got certain asset classes which I can implement new technologies in conjunction with my old ones to accelerate how to do trading in a different way. So those things can coexist, and you've got to just have a philosophy of how do I apply technology to solve business problems, and don't always be encumbered by the legacy. Be creative in how to actually, as organizations transform from the core and on the edge, technology should be thinking about it the same way.
I think for Amazon, from our perspective, like innovation, like the fact that there are innovation labs, right, at like banks and insurance companies, I think in like the ideal Amazon world, you would be thinking about innovation from a cultural standpoint. So how do you enable all teams to drive innovation versus just having one specific team that's designated and then has to kind of like sell to internal stakeholders and business partners to actually implement it? And so I think from that perspective, it's really more of like what kind of cultural changes need to happen for your company to like not shame failures, for example, and to say like, okay, if this was a failure, what is the lesson here? Learn it, and then let's move on. So I think for us, innovation is very much something that should be a part of your everyday. Like you should always be trying to take a look at like what we call status quo and then improving on it and figuring out like, what is the way that I can, what's wrong with this process? Like reflect on it. How can we improve this? If there's something wrong, like it's everyone's job to kind of pick it up and make it better. And innovation, doesn't have to be really massive projects that you're kind of, need a whole team to implement and need to go and get stakeholder buy-in. It can be small changes that you do throughout your, daily activities and BAU, because all of those things stack up. And that's where I think it's truly where innovation should really be starting, rather than like from the actual innovation labs. Although like, still better than nothing. At least we have a team doing it. But I think there's a different approach that might work as well.
I couldn't agree more with you, Lillian. And I was trying to find a polite way to say it, but you were much more eloquent than me. Is that if you look at the average innovation lab, and this is maybe unfair on some people, they're building like a mobile app. That's not innovative. That's like what you should have been doing 15 years ago, guys. Come on. Okay, maybe not 15 years ago, but and that is absolutely the distributed responsibility of every single department. If what you're talking about is actually getting up to the status quo of what any other company would be doing if they were starting from scratch, then that's not innovation. The innovation lab can be doing the truly innovative stuff, right? Which is like, deep tech maybe, or we have no idea if this is going to work fundamentally. But if the innovation lab is just adopting what would be state of the art, but widespread technology, then that's not innovation. And that is just the responsibility of every single part of the business, just full stop. But Lillian said it much better than me, so thank you, Lillian.
I got you, Ned.
Awesome. We do have one final question for all the speakers. This is what are some of the common misconceptions that people have about deep technology and about the entire digital transformation process? More importantly, how can we combat these misconceptions and communicate more effectively? And how would you communicate it to the current audience that is watching right now? Lynn, do you want to take this first?
Sure, yeah. I think in my domain of deep tech, and actually I was literally just reflecting on this, like, I don't know if deep tech is really that deep anymore. Like, I feel like cloud is pretty much like very accessible for everyone. I think it's quite like democratized access to, servers in the sky or whatever. I think it's like pretty normal now. So I don't know if I would call it deep tech, but just from that perspective, I think like it breaks my heart when I still see startups comparing cloud to sort of like on-premise environments and saying like, oh, like this is how we used to do it. So like, how do I do it on AWS? And it's just like, well, if you want to do that, but in the cloud, like there's no point. Like you shouldn't be using cloud to do the same thing you were doing previously, or like, and it kind of goes back to, I think, what we were discussing in the beginning of this chat, which was like transformation. Like you should really be thinking about cloud as a paradigm shift. And probably the same thing for like blockchain, AI, ML analytics, right? Like you shouldn't be using these technologies to continue what you were doing before, but really introduce a shift into how you're driving results. So when I see customers like saying, oh, like I need a VM with like these specifications, like, no, like we haven't talked about VMs for like 3 years. Like we should be discussing, do you want to do containers? Do you want to do like something like Fargate managed containers? We should be having more like business driven conversations about like what's your data strategy? What data are you collecting on your users? What do you want to know? What are the insights you want to get? It should no longer be like, answering questions about like the specifications of the VMs and how much storage you're going to get. So yeah, I think that's the number one thing for me, is like the biggest misconception about cloud is how people are using it.
Cool. How would like to go next?
Sure. Yes, I think from my point of view, if you look at deep tech, it's nothing new in my opinion, right? So when we talk about AI, ML, 20, 30 years ago, the whole idea of using neural networks was there, right? Where you do a lot of deep training, then you do inferencing and all that. In fact, my final year thesis 30 years ago was actually on neural networks, right? So, but then we were talking about using 1 bit, what they call massively parallel processor, arrays of processor, 1,000 over such processors to do such simulation. Now, what really drove the adoption of deep tech, in my opinion, is that a few things. Compute power is where you think about it. Over the years, the mobile phone that you have is actually more powerful than what I used to do my final year thesis. Now, mobile phone itself is also enabler technology, where it has actually made all this deep tech that we talk about no longer deep, like what Lillian said, right? So in fact, if that's the biggest misconception, is that nothing new. But what is new is how we adopted it, right? There are creative ways of where we look at technology, how we are using technology for example, video analytics, right? The COVID situation has actually, forced us to think, how do I do, video analytics on people who are not wearing masks, for example, right? So that's a new application of deep tech. So that's the biggest misconception, in my opinion. Deep tech is with us. Deep tech is actually entrenched in a lot of what we do these days. So how do you communicate some of these things? I think from the beginning of this session, there are many opinions that the panel has given. I think I do agree with Ned. Top-down approach, bottom-up approach. Those are all approaches that we can try. But what is important is we need to be open about how we communicate deep tech. With technology comes power as well, right? So how do we make sure that what we do it's beneficial to community, right? So this is where as innovators, startups, and all that, we do have responsibility, accountability to ensure what we do for the community it's good. It helps with human progress, right? At the same time, governments have a role to play as well. So this is I think in a nutshell, keyword is be open, be accountable for how we communicate this deep tech, how we use it. Yeah.
Great. I think that's some good insights over there. Rick, would you like to have any? I think we have about 1 minute or 2 minutes left, so perhaps Rick and Ned, Yeah.
I think one of the misconceptions around deep tech is it's complicated and it's scary. Actually, it's not. I mean, I was talking to many boards about how to apply technology to solve business problems. And I think the only thing that's scary about it is sometimes trying to keep up to date with the innovation. I mean, literally, I've done a work at a bank in Thailand where it took my team 12 months to build it. Between jobs, I built it on SageMaker in 6 weeks. I mean, so just a gap of about 2 years. It's moving very quickly, becoming from experimentation to reality very fast. I think so. It's really communicating the benefits of what you get from technology, and that they are solving business problems is probably the biggest misconception, is that it takes big brainy, and democratizing it to where everybody understands it, from the board to the senior C-suite down to the junior people, and then that it allows us to be less scared of it and embrace it in our everyday job.
Great. And Ned, would you like to have the last comment here before we end off this session?
Sure. I'm going to take a slightly different view. And it's that deep tech is really, really hard. But it's really, really hard for the people who are doing the deep tech. And I think the biggest misconception, or what I would like to sort of clean up if I had a magic wand, is the cohorts of who are doing what. And so, for example, taking deep tech and applying it to business problems is not hard. And so using SageMaker is something that people shouldn't get so tied up in the AI ML elements of it and more on the business outcomes. Now, the person who was writing the TensorFlow library for convolutional neural networks in TensorFlow and then making that work within SageMaker in a way that you can just click a button and it all just pops up, that was really hard, right? Kudos to that dude. But now we can all take advantage of that. And so when startups come and they say, oh, I'm an AI company because I've downloaded a framework and I use it, I'm like, you're not an AI company, you're just a company. The guys who developed that framework, they can call themselves an AI company. And so the communication, and then of course that gets very messy because then it does seem like it's too hard. Oh, you've got to use this application, oh, but it's AI, it's a little bit complicated to me. It's not, it's just an application. It happens to use AI, or it happens to use blockchain, it happens to use whatever under the hood, but it's just an application that someone has used. And so those sort of categories I think are very important. The one, as a saver, the one kind of counter to myself would be, if you're raising money as a startup, stick AI in there, stick blockchain in there, stick whatever you want in there, make it look like you're deep tech. I'm an idiot. I tried to raise money, and for a startup I did before, and every single time I'd give this big presentation at the end of it, they'd say, that's cool, but where's the blockchain? And because I'm a man of honor, I explained that there was no blockchain. What I should have done is just put a box on the diagram and said, there's the blockchain. And so if you're raising money, then I'd say that's perhaps a different conversation. But for everyone else, just communicate what you're actually doing, which is solving business problems, unless you're an actual deep tech company, in which case you're, kudos, that's hard. I'll leave it with that.
Great, thanks everyone. We are a little out of time. So I think thank you very much to Ned, Rick, Hao-Han, and Lillian. Much appreciated the time that you've given here. All right, so to the audience, thank you for participating in this session. If you're interested, you can always feel free to add more questions. We'll come back to you on those questions. And thank you. We'll end the session right here.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
Chen.
Bye.